Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. We're just going to wait just probably about 30 seconds while we wait for everyone to log in. We've got quite a crowd that's joining us this afternoon. So while we're waiting, it would be great to hear where everyone's from. If I can just get you to drop in the chat where you're from. And also if you are interested in B2C or B2B. I think we're still waiting. Okay, we're just getting that chat organised for you so that you can drop your comments in and let us know where you're from. And then I think we'll get started if you're fine with that, Mike. Okay, well, good afternoon and welcome to ADMA's Lunch and Learn series with today's best practice in customer journey mapping. There's certainly a strong interest in this topic, judging by the attendance, and we have people from all over Australia joining us today. My name is Edwina Ellicott, and I'm the Education Manager for ADMA. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy days to invest in yourself and your education. As the principal industry body for data-driven marketing and advertising in Australia, ADMA's mission is to guide marketers of all career stages through the ever-changing marketing landscape. ADMA supports members with 24/7 opportunities for education through in-person and online learning and networking events. We also provide advocacy with government and regulatory bodies. Additionally, we are a rich source of industry updates and resources to help better marketers now and into the future. But before I introduce Mike, a bit about the flow of how we're going to work this webinar today. So we encourage you to pop your questions into the chat box. And if you're joining us via the live stream, you'll find a link in the email that you received, which you can use to send through your questions. And towards the end of the session, we'll have about 15 minutes for discussion. After the session, we'll be sending a feedback survey, and we'd love to hear what you thought of the webinar. You're also going to be receiving a customer journey mapping toolkit, which has been designed to be applied in your own workplace. It's also a thank you for attending. And now for best practice in customer journey mapping, I'd like to introduce Mike Zeederberg. Mike is a leading figure in the digital marketing industry, both in Australia and overseas. He has held senior management roles in several digital agencies before starting up his own agency, Zuni. Mike is a subject matter expert that teaches several ADMA IQ courses, and he's been on the judging panel for several industry awards. Mike works along ADMA IQ as a member of the Education Working Group and currently is the instructor for customer journey mapping, B2B customer journey mapping, and email marketing strategy courses. And now, Mike, I'm going to hand over to you. We can't wait to hear what you're going to tell us about customer journey mapping. Thank you.
No worries. Thanks, Edwina, and welcome everybody. Just a quick update, if you can use the Q&A rather than the chat, we're aware that chat is disabled, so feel free to use the Q&A for putting in your questions and we'll pick them up from there. Welcome everybody, and thank you very much for coming along. I will be sharing my screen and running through stuff, but I guess the first question is who the hell am I and what right do I have to tell you stuff about customer journeys? So my name is Mike Zeederberg. As I say, I've been doing customer journey mapping for a while. My day job is actually as a marketing strategist. So I work closely with our clients to help them work out how to use lots of different marketing channels to drive business outcomes. Part of that process is, and what that has always been, has been to try and work out and understand how to make sure that we're getting to the right strategy. And early on, we actually landed on the use of customer journey maps as a key way of developing strategy. So you can say I became a customer journey mapping specialist simply because it was a quick and easy way to write strategies, or it was because I was lazy, and so understanding the audience gave us the best opportunity to engage and put together the right strategic approach. As Edwina said, I've worked on a fair range of different clients, both B2C and B2B. I also work in the not-for-profit space and worked on everything from blue chip large brands all the way through to startups and small businesses. So the processes and hints and tips that I'm going to go through today are put together across a reasonably wide range of different services, but very happy to sort of take questions and see how we can apply it to different spaces. So jumping on in, today's agenda, in 45 minutes or less, we're going to cover off why is customer journey mapping important? What is it that makes customer journeys interesting? And how come everybody is starting to use them? What are the changes that have happened that make it worthwhile? We'll talk about the essentials of a customer journey map and how do we put it together? What process do we go through to develop a customer journey map, and how does that then help us? And look at 5 best practice tips in terms of actually putting that map together. Then we'll talk about how do we stress test it. Once we've got it, how do we then actually make sure it's right, and some common mistakes and how to avoid them. And then we'll finish off with some Q&A at the end. I'll try and make sure that I don't talk for too long and make sure that there's time to answer people's questions as we get to the end of the session. So jumping straight on into it, what is the customer journey and why does it matter? The Marketunist is always my go-to source of irreverent communication around the journey spaces. And really what we're trying to do with customer journeys is understand the journey a customer is going through when they're solving a problem where we are part of the solution. And I use that slightly clunky phraseology very specifically because the customer journey is all about the customer. It's about them solving a problem and how we can facilitate being part of the solution to their problem. It's quite different to product selling, where we tell people lots and lots about who we are and what we have, and then we hope like hell they make a decision to choose us. Where we're looking at customer journeys, we're looking at it from the outside in, and we're trying to say, what is the journey they're on? What problem are they trying to solve? And how do we become part of that solution? One of the biggest challenges that often comes up, and I'll pick this up again later, is the fact that people map out customers' touch points through that purchasing process with the brand. So they go, right, they saw us on search, and then they went to our website, and then they went away. So we targeted them with a Facebook ad, and then they came back to our website, and then they walked into our retail, and then they came back onto our website, and then they phoned us up, and then at the end they made a purchase. And we map all that out, and that's our customer journey. That's actually not the customer journey. That's simply a brand touchpoint map of what we hoped the customer journey would be. And the customer journey may well have involved a whole bunch of other steps where they went and Googled you, or they looked at your social media, or they went to 4 of your competitors, or they went to a review site. And off the back of that, never came back again, no matter how much you retargeted them. So when we talk about the customer journey, it's important to make sure we're actually mapping the journey of the customer, solving a problem that we're part of the solution to, not simply mapping their touch points with us and going, look how clever we are. These people managed to make it all the way through to actually purchase our product. The reason customer journeys have started to become more and more important is because they are providing us with a really interesting way of getting to the answer around the age-old conundrum of how do we get the right message to the right person in the right channel at the right time. This is obviously the key for most business strategies, which is to say, if we put the right stuff in front of the right people, they will buy our product, or they will do the thing that is we're looking for them to do. And so that'll drive the business outcome. But what's happened is we have more and more capability to do this. We can target people in lots of different ways. Previously, we didn't have many options. We would put out a broadcast message, people would see it, and then we'd know if they bought stuff or didn't buy stuff afterwards. Now we can see them all the way through that process. We can see if they're Googling us. We can see if they land up on our website. We can tell if they're moving around the internet, and we can target them. We can see if they've given us an email address. We can track them through that entire process. And what we can do is use the customer journey to unpack, if they're at this particular stage, what message should I be giving them, and which channel are they going to be using, and how do I know that they're at that point so that I can make sure that they get that information. So we now have the ability to technologically target people as they go through that journey. Our biggest challenge is understanding what do we send? Which channel do we send it in? Who are they? What do we know about them? How do we unpack that? And we have all these cool, exciting technologies, CRM and marketing automation and DXPs. And yet understanding how to develop the rules and create the frameworks that then allow those things to deliver against the best opportunity, that then is why customer journeys are becoming quite interesting. It's also the idea around the complexity of channels. There are too many channels for us to be able to use all of them. So we have to try and work out and understand which channels are going to be the most effective for us. And again, the customer journey unpacks that. In a world where a lot of products and services are becoming commoditized, where as much as we would love to think our product is unique compared to any of our competitive set, from a consumer perspective, often there is a perception that they're all pretty much the same. Even in the technology space, I can buy an Apple, I can buy Samsung, they're both phones, they both have cameras with a bazillion pixels, they're pretty much of a muchness. Even in spaces where you're seeing high levels of functional differentiation from a consumer perspective, that's often not the case. Which means that businesses are starting to compete on the experience rather than simply on the product. Telling people my product is better than the competition isn't enough if the consumer believes that all products pretty much do the same job. So making sure that that is an easy, simple purchase experience, making sure that we're meeting their needs throughout that process does mean that we can start actually competing on the experience rather than on the product itself. A response to one of the questions, yes, we will be talking B2B as well as B2C. I've got a couple of slides on B2B coming up in a second. As I say, we have the technological capability of actually responding, but we're starting to move in this world where it's about problem solving rather than product selling. How do I make sure that I'm addressing the problem that you've got rather than simply hoping that you'll choose my product when it comes time to actually get to that point of the purchase process? And the more I can get involved with you upstream, the more likely you are to put me on the short list, and the more likely you are to be considered. Customer journeys are of most relevance for higher consideration products. Doesn't necessarily mean higher value, but products where people are engaged with the category. Interestingly, there are lots of customer journeys around low consideration and low interest products. We've done a lot of work in the exciting world of superannuation, for example. But where people are having big complex decisions to make, that tends to be where customer journeys really come into their own. The customer journey of somebody buying a Kit Kat is not particularly long and extensive, but somebody choosing to build their own home, from our experience, covers 7 A3 pieces of paper stuck up on a boardroom wall. So the more complex it is, the more easier it is to be going through. There is a question about, are we looking at through a not-for-profit? This same process applies to not-for-profits. A donor journey map is a similar sort of thing, whether it's a donor journey, whether it's somebody who's in looking at a service delivery. It does definitely work for that, but we have not going to be looking at that specific lens today in terms of where we're going with that. So these are the reasons why customer journeys have come to the forefront, that we have the ability to do stuff. We need to know the insights in order for us to create more complex marketing strategies that drive the business outcomes that we're looking for. As I say, in the B2B world, this is even more apparent. For those of you that know the Challenger buying process, 89% of problems are identified without supplier input. So a huge part of customer journeys happen before somebody phones you, before somebody even gets in touch. So we tend to be in the race without even knowing we're part of the race, and we may win or lose without even knowing we were there in the first place. So the more we can unbundle and unpack what's going on in the early stages of a B2B journey, and the more we can make sure that when people are doing online research, or they're looking at reviews, or they're speaking to their friends or their colleagues about a particular product category, we can try and make sure that we get to the point where we are one of those vendors that gets reached out to. The other big challenge with B2B journeys is that 38% of purchases end in a no decision. Because they're complex, because they're challenging, 77% of people said their B2B journey was really complex. They just land up defaulting to, hey, it's all too hard, we're just going to keep going with what we've got. So there's a huge amount of wasted energy and effort. And the more we understand where those pain points on the journey are, the more we can then combat that and come up with solutions that allow people to complete the journey and therefore hopefully buy the product or service that we're offering. Part of the journey allows us to understand this middle graph here, which is only 17% of time is spent actually meeting potential suppliers. A whole bunch of time is spent in other activities, researching online, meeting with buying groups, internal stakeholder, researching independently offline. The more we understand the journey, the more we can understand what those activities look like, and the more we can understand how do we interact and how can we create engagement pieces, content, value in those other spaces which aren't in that face-to-face world. And the more we can help provide that information, the more likely we are to get the outcome that we're looking for. So whether you're B2B, whether you're B2C, customer journeys have become a really key way of trying to unpack and create a detailed understanding of nuance that we can then use when we put our marketing strategies back together from there. So when we're actually looking at how do we create that customer journey, what are the processes and steps that we take as we go through that journey, we start thinking about what does that process look like. As I say, the customer journey itself is this complete sum of experiences. It's not just their touch points with you, but it's everything that they're thinking and doing as they're going through that particular process. Where did they start? What were they thinking about? What does it look like? And then the customer journey map is a visual representation of the experiences that they're going through when they go through that process. It's pretty important to keep coming at it through their eyes to make sure that it is the journey of the customer, not simply the ideal space that we want people to be, the ideal journey that we want people to be traveling on with us. Because the more we know and understand that, the more we can understand where the opportunities lie. If you simply map out the touch points with our brand, that's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy of how it works now. What it doesn't show is, right, the people who went from awareness to consideration or went from consideration to final evaluation, where did they drop out? Why did they drop out? What could we have done? Where else did they go? What other information were they getting? Those are all the bits that we want to be picking up on because they provide the opportunity for other points of engagement as we go through that process. In terms of the actual journey model itself, this is the most familiar one. Everybody will have learned if you did your 4 Ps or did any sort of basic marketing communications training, you will have come up with the awareness, consideration, purchase, loyalty model. This was developed by the interestingly named E. St. Elmo Lewis a couple of centuries ago. And we've sort of worked with it ever since. And so that standard acquisition funnel model is one that we are still playing with, but there's been a whole bunch of research done since then. McKinsey came up with this idea of a trigger, that every customer journey starts with a trigger. That trigger can be intrinsic, so it might be something that I've done or something that's happened in my life that's caused me to be there, or it could be extrinsic. It could be something where it is the outside world has caused me to think about and reevaluate things and triggered me into market. So for example, I could have, as I went to the office today, dropped my mobile phone on the way here, cracked the screen, and suddenly I'm being triggered into market to buy a new mobile phone. I could also have been sitting on my couch last night and watching TV, and up came an Apple ad, which showed the new iPhone, that's got a bazillion pixels and seemed to indicate that I can become the world's best content creator simply by owning a new Apple iPhone. And that made me start feeling that, well, I'm pretty happy with my Samsung. Maybe it's getting a bit daggy, and yeah, the battery does run out quite quickly these days. And I wonder when my contract's up because I might, that phone does look pretty cool. So I've had an external trigger that's pushed me into market that then has got me into this sort of space. Once I'm in market, I start thinking about what are my initial considerations. I go through the evaluation, and eventually I get to that moment of purchase. And then I go through the post-purchase phase where I've got my product, I'm involved with it. Post-purchase has become much more important in the digital era because post-purchase of other purchases now affect the pre-purchase of our new clients. It used to be if I wasn't happy with what I'd got, I'd tell a few people at a barbecue. Nowadays, I'll tell the entire world by putting up a review, by jumping on your social media, by publishing a blog, worst case scenario, that appears at the top of the Google rankings. And so post-purchase actually has an active impact on what's happening in that active evaluation stage. At some point, there will be another trigger. Something will happen. Maybe it will be that my contract runs out with my phone supplier. And as a result, I then have this decision to make. Do I go into the loyalty loop and simply keep going, or do I go into active evaluation? Do I start all over again? This particular post-purchase loyalty loop, this is where our relationship journey lives. And relationship journeys are interesting because they're quite different to acquisition journeys. When I'm on an acquisition journey, I have a problem to solve. My phone is broken, I need a new phone, or I have this sense that my phone isn't quite up to scratch for what it could be. I'm going to go out and I'm going to research and I'm going to buy a new phone. I'm on a journey starting from a point of triggering through to a point of purchase at the end. Where I'm in a relationship with a business, that journey is passive. I'm not on a journey with my current telco provider at the moment. I'm simply paying my bill every month and I'm pretty happy with where I am. Same with my bank account or my superannuation or World Vision. I'm simply in that space. And it's only if I hit a trigger that I'm going to suddenly reevaluate whether or not that's right. If Telco dropped the ball and I can't get signal, if my bank charged me a large amount of excess fees that I weren't expecting, those triggers are then likely to get me to say, do I want to do something about this? Sometimes we know when those triggers are going to occur. So if you're in the B2B world, there may be a natural end of your contract. It comes up at the end of 3 years, we will have to go back through procurement and back to a tender process. Or it may be that if you're in the superannuation world, every year we send you a statement that says this is how much your super is worth, and this is the return that you got. If you compare the return to the return that other people in your household got, and yours is smaller than theirs, you're likely triggered into thinking, do I need to do something with my superannuation? So we can think about and map out what are the triggers we know about where we're in relationship journeys and how do we manage them? Because the relationship journey tends to be from the business to the end customer rather than the customer going through a process to then lock it down. So when you're thinking customer journeys, and I'll touch on this in a sec, there are a number of different frames of journeys rather than simply everything fits into the awareness, consideration, loyalty model. The other thing we know about customer journeys is something that Forrester decided to do. They took all the customer research and they said, right, hold our beer, we're going to put this all together. And they came up with this pretty exciting model about customer journeys. And one of the key things that this tells us, and this agrees with the other research that's been done by other people, is that the journey is not linear. We don't start from an awareness model, then we become into consideration, and then we go into purchase, and we can never go back up that funnel. Quite often, we wander around this journey, and we go up and we go down, and we go to different spaces, and we might wander in and we start doing a comparison activity, and then actually we decide to go back and we do a bit more research. And that research means we come back and all the way up to discover here, and we start finding some new options that we didn't think about. So we come back down into research. So we know that people don't necessarily go through the journey in a completely linear stage, which always begs the question, why do we create linear customer journeys if we know they don't map and model back to the behaviors that we see with consumers? And the reason for that is because it doesn't matter. If we create a customer journey that understands the flow of how a customer is solving a problem where we can be part of the solution. And if we look at each one of those stages and we say at this stage, they're using these channels to find out this sort of information. These are the types of things that are important to them. This is the stuff they're looking for. This is the stuff that's top of mind. And we know that we're responding to their needs at each one of those stages. It doesn't matter that it's not linear, because every time they bounce to different stages, we can supply the information and the content in the channels that they need it to be, to nudge them in the direction that hopefully they'll come out as a purchaser of our product. So we can still use the journey as a really good framework for making sure we have the right messages in the right place, so that when the right time comes, hopefully they are in the position where we can get them to prefer us rather than prefer our competition. So if we think about the process of creating a customer journey, this is where our experience differs quite significantly from marketing textbooks. So we go through the first stages. The first thing to think about is, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? What is the business challenge you want to address? Sometimes we work with clients who are like, I need a customer journey. And we go, excellent, because we're quite good at those. Why do you want this customer journey, and what problem are you solving? And they're like, well, I want it because it's in my KPIs, and apparently it's a good thing to have customer journeys, so we want to map it out. And those projects always go really badly, because the amorphous engagement journeys, or the idea of, right, we just want to map out what our customer's doing, doesn't really have a focus. You need to think about, what is the problem I'm trying to solve, where a customer journey is going to allow me to understand my opportunities to actually build that solution. Is it, quite often a journey could be sell more stuff, or get more customers, or reduce churn, or engage with, improve the cross-sell upsell with our existing customers. Any of those things are very good ways to start framing the journey, because once you know the challenge, if our objective is to sell more stuff, then clearly our audience segment is people we don't know already. If our objective is to upsell, cross-sell, then clearly our starting audience is people who have bought from us before, or people who are currently engaged with us. So when you're thinking about doing a customer journey, make sure you know why you're doing it. What is it you're trying to engage with, and what is it you're trying to solve, so that you can make sure you're mapping the right journey. Once you work out what that challenge is, you can then go, what are the audience segments? And the key things around audience segments is to make sure that you're looking at them from a relevance perspective. Very often we get caught up in segmentation by demographics. How old are they? What's their postcode? But actually the reason we use audience segmentation is relevance. And with a journey, we want to know and understand, are there different audience segments that go through different paths in our journey? And that then starts leading us into what is the journey we want to map. The journey we want to map should generally be a problem that our customer is solving that, when we are part of the solution, fixes the business challenge that we've got. So, for example, our business challenge might be to sell more mobile phones, and the problem that I'm trying to solve is staying engaged with the world whilst I'm out of my home. Those two things will collide, and hopefully I will end up buying the phone that I was looking for. This is where we differ from the traditional marketing text, which is normally you'd say, what's my business challenge? Who's my customer journey? Who's my audience? What's the journey? And the next step is always go and do the research. Go and ask your customers what they do, where they go, how they work, what they need. And when we first started, that's exactly what we did. We focused on getting out there and understanding our customers. At this point, we'd go and do some one-on-one focus groups. We'd go and do some surveys. We would diligently map all of that stuff up and create a journey. And we'd call our client in and we'd say, hey, look what we've done. Isn't this fantastic? What do you think? And they'd go, yeah, that's pretty much what I expected. Yeah, I could have told you all that. But what happens at that bit? At that particular point in that thing, there's about 4 different options there that you've got. They could do this, or they could do that, or they could do, which one did they do more often? And at this point, we're not really sure why they make that decision. I mean, we're glad they come and choose us, but why us and why not the competitors? And we'd go, we didn't ask those questions because we were just doing broader research. And so what we quickly worked out is that most businesses already know quite a lot about their customer journey. There are people inside your business who spend all day, every day engaging with your customers and have a reasonably good understanding of what that journey is. So if you can get them all in a room and get them to actually map out that journey, you quite quickly work out what you know and what you don't know. And when you then do go to that research stage, when you do go to validation, you then make sure you're asking the right questions. You're spending your time and energy focusing on spaces where you haven't got an understanding of what's going on, or you need particular gaps filled, rather than doing more macro stuff. Those people who you use in that customer journey could be a range of different people. In the B2B world, getting a bunch of sales guys in a room and asking them to map out how the deal flow works is always interesting. Sometimes it turns to fisticuffs, not often, but there are always different opinions on how that fits together. And that often shapes different segments in your journey. In the B2C world, going and chatting to your customer contact center can be really revealing. But out of the top 10 reasons that people phone you, 4 or 5 of them will be pain points in your customer journeys. In this day and age, people only phone you if things are going badly wrong. They would much rather go online and solve the problem themselves. So that sort of stuff is like, right, there's definitely an issue there. So creating that assumptive journey and then validating it means that you get a much better, much quicker, more valid journey faster, rather than doing it the other way around. Once you've got the journey, you can then start thinking about, how do I use that journey to create business solutions and implementation plans in terms of what that is? One of the things to think about, so my top 5 hints and tips for creating journeys. When you initially start thinking about it, what is the problem you're solving and what level of detail do you need on your map to solve it? Are you, for example, trying to sell into a board level the fact that we need to be really, really clear about what role social media plays in our acquisition funnel? In which case you're looking at a map like the one on the right-hand side here. But if you're thinking about what technology systems we need and what forms are we going to put in and what stuff we're going to create at each stage in the journey, you need something more like the map on the left-hand side here, with those columns down the bottom about, right, what are our organizational activities and who's responsible and what technology systems have we got. And so we can map lots of different things on the journey, but you need to make sure you've thought about that before you even start mapping the journey, so you can capture that right from the word go. Could be technology, it could be competition activity, it could be our own things we're already doing. All of those things can be mapped onto the journey. You just need to make sure you're aware of it. Tip number 2, definitely do that assumptive customer journey. Make sure that you're getting everybody in a room and working through what that journey looks like. This is us mapping out the reasonably complex journey of buying life insurance. And we got team by team by team people in to talk about their bit in that journey. what was happening in sales, what was happening in marketing, then in sales, then in the actual process of actually getting a customer to fill in the forms, then in the underwriting process, and ultimately in the claims process. And each team told us about, right, what's going on, what artifacts do we use, what are the pain points, what do we know happens with customers, where does that all go through, and allowed us to build up a really interesting picture of what we already knew and what that journey looked like. But then we could also focus in on the places that we didn't know stuff about. And that's the bit that we then went in and focused when we did the research and did that. As I say, choose the right framework. Not everything fits into an awareness, consideration, purchase journey. There are purchase journeys, which are generally at the heart of acquisition, but there are problem-solving journeys that sit around that purchase journey. Yes, I bought a ticket to this event, but why? What was the problem you were solving? Was it to upskill your knowledge? Was it to network? Was it to connect with other people? Was it as a team building exercise for your whole team? Those are different reasons that could result in the same purchase journey and create different opportunities to capture people at the top end of that customer funnel. So problem-solving journeys and purchase journeys are quite related, but can be quite different. Relationship journeys, as I say, are different. They tend to be passive from a customer perspective, and they tend to be more about us reaching out to our audience and either managing triggers or responding to triggers, trying to work out how we can keep people on board, or trying to create a trigger, trying to upsell or cross-sell to that particular person. Supported journeys are really interesting. These are journeys where the person is not a customer of yours, where they aren't necessarily part of that process, but they are a very influential piece of that process. So, for example, that might be the board of directors who are signing off on a B2B journey, or it might be the IT department, who they themselves are not going to buy your software solution, but if they veto it, it's all over. So building a relationship with the IT team might actually be as important to you as engaging with the marketing team when you're selling in that cool, exciting DXP platform solution. So supported journeys are quite interesting in terms of identifying and building relationships with people who tend to be involved in the periphery of a purchase journey, but not go on them themselves. Then there's the transaction and multi-user journeys. This is the one we often use in B2B, where there are multiple players in that particular journey. If you think about a procurement process, there's somebody driving it, and there's somebody on our side who's potentially responding to it from a sales perspective. But it might be that we're also going through, right, there's got to be a technology solution, and then it goes to procurement, and then it goes to a tender panel, and then there's IT, and then there's legal. And through that journey, mapping out the journeys of the individuals would be a bit of a struggle. So we map out the journey of the transaction, and we map all the roles onto that journey in terms of how that goes. We also use this quite a lot in the healthcare space. So we're doing a big project with ADMA Australia, and there we've actually mapped out the journey of somebody having triggers, symptoms, getting diagnosed with, and then ultimately living with asthma. So it's the journey of the disease rather than the journey of the individual, and then what influence and what happens at each one of those stages. Where does the GP play? Where does their carer play? Where does the pharma company play? Where does an association play? What do they all look like as they go through? And then finally, there's B2B2C. So when you're selling through an intermediary, the motor industry. So for example, manufacturer sells to dealer, dealer sells to customer, not a financial services, everything you buy in Coles and Woolies, it's all B2B2C. And so then you have to map out the B2B journey and the B2C journey and see how do you influence the relationship journey so that you can influence the purchase journey. So choose your framework. Make sure you have the right framework for the challenge that you're trying to address, and make sure you're not just trying to shove everything into an awareness, consideration, purchase type of model. Fourth, out of my 5 key tips, make sure you have the right levels of skills and experience and resource. Resource generally comes down to research. So how much money have you got to throw at research, and what does that look like? Research budget tends to give you a sense of validation of how accurate my journey is. The more research you do, the more accurate you're convinced that your journey can become. You can do guerrilla-based research, you can do just random a survey monkey out to our existing email base, or you can do far more rigorous research in terms of that, and make sure you've got the right stuff on board. From a skills perspective, do your team have the right skills to make sure you're not falling into the same bear traps and all those sort of traps for young beginners in terms of putting the project together. From a time perspective, customer journeys are interesting because they fall into that important but not urgent category of marketing activities. So nobody ever lost their job because they didn't get the customer journey done in time. But if that campaign doesn't go out or that Christmas appeal isn't completed, it's all going to go pear-shaped. So it's quite often possible for customer journey projects to wither and die without ever reaching completion. We love customer journey projects that have got a very firm deadline. It's been presented to the leadership team on this date, or going to board at that point, or we have a specific event that we need to do, and it's going to come to that space. So make sure that you actually give your journey, your project, a deadline so that it all goes through. And my final tip is make it visual. These are the two journeys that we've created. The top on the right-hand side is actually the journey we did for ADMA. Ironically, it's the journey you will have completed because you are researched, booked, and attended this particular event. Although clearly this was a free event, so no purchase activity, but we've sort of mapped that out and mapped out all the key components of it. And the journey below is that ASMA journey that I was talking about earlier. No matter how well you design your journeys in Excel or PowerPoint, in Excel, they're not going to be as appealing as if you can make them visual. We recently used this journey down the bottom, and I'll show this to you in a sec, where we actually mapped on current activity, had it printed up on A0 pieces of paper in the room, and had a workshop where everybody mapped stuff on. And the fact that it had all the little arrows and boxes and what happened and where it went was far more impactful than if it had been an Excel spreadsheet. So try and make it visual in terms of what it is. Okay, so on to stress testing customer journeys. How do we know this thing is accurate? How do we make it work out if it's real or not? Clearly, once you've got your assumptive journey, go out there and research. And the first thing you can do is map back your own data to it. Right at this point, we think people come on our website and they look at this particular page and they need this sort of information. Jump on your Google Analytics and say, hey, is this one of our most visited pages? Are these the search terms that we're seeing coming into this particular area? We think that people read our emails because these are the types of stories that they're most interested in. Go back to your email send engine, and don't just look at campaign open rates and click-throughs. Look at what did they click on? Are those stories getting lots of traction? Are there natural segments in the way that people are engaging with your emails? This is what we think our biggest audience segment is. Go back to your audience database and your purchasing database and actually look at the data and do data analysis. So very often as part of our customer journey projects, we'll deeply dive into existing data because it gives you some really interesting insights about what may be happening as part of that journey, particularly where you're looking at things like churn journeys and why people are dropping out and why you're losing customers. Obviously, you can do more standard research techniques like one-on-one interviews. We'll typically do a number of call interviews with customers to make sure that we have a good understanding of them. Where we do this research, it's different to traditional research where we're generally asking, why did you buy from us? We're generally asking questions about how did you buy from us? What did you do? What triggered you into market? What were the first things you looked at? Which channels did you use? What information were you looking for? So it's actually quite a different conversation to your traditional focus group that we normally use for marketing or your one-on-one interviews. Once we've done the one-on-one, we'll typically then do a survey. We will then add in quantitative so that we know that those 4 out of 5 people who told us TikTok was a key channel in their purchasing of a CRM platform, were they an anomaly or is that actually true? Is TikTok really about 80% of the business market? So we can see whether or not we're actually getting that right space, and it allows us to get numbers that we can map onto the journey. X percentage went through this channel, Y percentage went through that channel, that sort of stuff. There is often industry research available about how your industry works, what's happening in that purchase space. Where we work in the car manufacturing industry, there is an amazing database of why people buy new cars and the reasons that they do and what that looks like. Live data that's only 30 days old because they researched 30% of the market. So that was far better than any research we could do. So we used a lot of that as part of our work in that space. There are lots of ways you can track people as they go through digital channels in terms of usability studies, in terms of live tracking, click tails, those sort of things. And you can also do live testing. We do this a lot with startups where they haven't got necessarily the budget to invest in large scale research. We just moved straight from a hypothesis journey model into test and learn. Well, we aren't sure if people will respond to this message. If this is important to them or that's important to them, fantastic. Put up 2 landing pages, send half the traffic to each, and pretty quickly we'll know the answer to that. So you can actually create live models to test your journey with if you're short on budget and you're quick to market in terms of that space. That sort of approach would have absolutely blown up any of our big blue chip clients, but it works really well in the startup world. As I say, one of the things we can do to stress test it is to actually say, this is our journey. What are we currently doing? What's the rest of the market doing? So this is the journey of how you get diagnosed if you have asthma. And we mapped onto that all the activities that Asthma Australia is doing. We mapped onto that the activities that the Lung Foundation is doing and the health is doing and hospitals are doing. And we came up with key areas where we needed to focus. A 3-hour workshop with This is the Centre brought everybody on board, from the research team to the people that are running the programs to the people who are actually involved in putting together policy, and gave everybody a clear picture of what was going on and where it was. And we stress tested the journey because there was nothing that came up that didn't have a space. Everything could fit in somewhere. Everything anybody threw at it had a line, had a box, had somewhere it could be related to. So we knew the journey was accurate in terms of a collective set of 8 people that were then stress testing what we were doing with the journey. Okay, I'm going to try and, there's been a number of questions come through, so I'm going to try and make sure I leave enough time for questions. So I'm going to jump into common mistakes and how to avoid them as we go, and then we'll start picking up on the questions. The first one, I've hammered on a bit about this already, but make sure you're mapping the customer journey. Make sure you map the journey the customer is going on, not just their touch points with you. A good way of checking this is if you find yourself discussing current state and future state journey maps and being in a bit of a discussion about, right, this is our current state, this is our future state, you should be able to map both current state and future state onto the same customer journey. The journey the customer goes through to solve the problem is the journey of the customer. What you do in response to that journey, you should be able to map both what we do now and what we do in the future rather than that. So if you have current and future states, probably mapping touch points. And make sure you get your head into the shoes of the customer rather than your own product space. There is no such thing as a perfect customer journey. No matter how much we would love customers to behave in the way we want them to behave, they quite often go and do stuff in ways that that don't make sense to us. A very good example of this is the banks trying to force everybody into digital banking no matter what, shutting down branches, forcing everybody into the online space. And then you get Bendigo Bank, who are rolling out new branches all over the place, growing amazingly well, because they're responding to the needs of customers rather than saying, how do we force customers to do stuff that is part of our value chain? So don't try and find the perfect journey. Try and work out how you can optimize all the different journeys that happen across the space. And then off the back of that, make sure that you accommodate the ones that make the most sense. Beware of locking your journey up in software or in a platform. Very often when we're on the courses, we get a lot of conversation around what's the best tool for customer journeys? This is a list of the top 10 customer journey mapping tools. That was the top ranking one on Google, so it must be the absolute bee's knees of a source. That was sarcastic, by the way. Somebody's doing a really good job of SEO optimization. And basically, it's showing you the key things, the key options that you've got. The first one is design tools. So things like InDesign, Photoshop, that sort of stuff. Very good from a visual perspective, allows you to get somebody to really make it happen. Then you have diagram tools, diagram platforms. So things like Lucidchart, Miro, Mural. Seeing a lot of these around now because quite often where we're having lots of people working remotely or work from home, rather than getting everyone in a room and using Post-it notes on the wall, you have to use these sort of tools to get people to collaborate as they go through that process. Those, again, are pretty good. Nearly all of them have got 2 or 3 different templates that you can use, from lane charts, customer journey charts, that sort of stuff. That work pretty well. And then you also get specialist tools. So things like Smaply, Canvanizer are both specific customer journey mapping tools. And then you're like, Mike, but if we've got all these cool, exciting tools, how come it looks like most of yours are done in Excel and PowerPoint? And it's because they're accessible. If you have a journey done in Photoshop or in InDesign, and we made this mistake with one of our big journeys, every time there needs to be a change, every time there's a spelling mistake spotted or something needs to move, you end up having to go back, get specialist skills to make it happen. And eventually the journey just becomes too hard to work with. It goes in the bottom drawer and everybody just ignores it. So even though they tend to be reasonably horrible, we land up going back to tools that people can use and are easily accessible. If everybody in your business has a license to Lucid Charge, that's fantastic. If they've got the skill to use it, that would be a great place to go. But if everybody's got PowerPoint and not much else, that's why we land up with journeys that look like this one, which are put together in PowerPoint because everybody can edit it. So while the actual frame isn't necessarily the easiest, it is definitely the accessibility is what counts for us. I've spoken to a number of customers who are like, yeah, we've got this amazing journey, but it takes 3 A0 pieces of paper to print it out and put it up on a wall, so nobody's ever really been able to use it. Make sure that your journey is useful rather than simply really well designed and accurate, but nobody can actually edit it and update it. Make sure you validate your journey. Sometimes people go, oh, well, we know so much about our customers that we don't need to go and talk to them. We have not had a single project where when we go out and talk to customers, we haven't been surprised by something. There is always an insight somewhere, always something that's really novel that we hadn't thought of before, and that often makes the difference in terms of cut through and in terms of changes that we can make. Okay, so I've managed to leave 14 minutes left, so 1 minute shy, but hopefully we can jump into some questions.
Wonderful. Mike, shall I? Thank you so much for that, Mike. That was great. Very efficient use of time. So much information packed in there and so many great tools and suggestions. And we have quite a few questions here. So what I'm going to do is read out a couple of these and throw them over to you. So I'm going to start with the first question here. How valuable is talking to customers and prospective customers? And if this is not possible, what data or analytics or voice of customer surveys would be enough to start getting a really good picture of the journey? So obviously talking to your customers is ideal, but if that's not always available to you, what else can you do, Mike? What else can you do to inform the journey?
Yeah, I mean, what we find with customer journeys is it's never about a one-off survey or a one-off engagement. It's all about ongoing engagement. So we do everything from formalized focus groups where we'll recruit through a recruitment place and get them in, to basic email surveys knocked together by our clients in SurveyMonkey and sent out to their existing email database. Anything is better than nothing, provided you understand the bias inherent in how you've collected the data. We're working in the pharma space at the moment. We've mapped out a couple of journeys. We know there are 2 or 3 areas that they're really unclear about what goes on in that space. So we've actually given the reps 5 questions to go and have, when they go and talk to people in the healthcare space, try and get answers to these 5 questions and then come back and let's collaborate and talk about what we've discovered. So you can do guerrilla research, you can do formalized research. The voice of the customer is really important because we really want to get their voice into this space. But the best advice is to say, don't do it as a one-off. Your business will be engaging with customers on an ongoing basis. Try and be a part of those conversations as many times as you can, whether that's sitting in the call center, whether that's spending a day in the retail outlet, any of those things where you can grab people, ask a few pointed questions, that becomes really interesting.
Right. Yeah. I guess that sort of leads you into, how often do you have to review the journey too? Because you were just mentioning, talk to the customers as often as possible. And obviously things change. So just thinking about that framework, is there is there a best practice in how often you should be reviewing the journey?
The reality is you should be re-informing the journey when you get results, because the journey initially starts off, you go and you research it and you map it out and do stuff, but then it turns into an artifact that should be your actual marketing activities. Start reporting and showing you what the journey looks like anyway. So we built this whole new microsite. Are we getting lots of traffic coming to it? If so, that means that, yep, that part of the journey is right. So we can map that back onto the journey. So you can actually map on active live marketing activity onto your journey in reverse, rather than having to write every 6 months, we go out and do yet another formal study and we look at it in terms of what it is. The customer element of journeys changes slowly. Customer behavior doesn't change that quickly. Even during COVID, we had a number of our clients come back saying, oh, COVID, our journey is going to be changed. Help us, what's it going to look like? And we did a whole bunch of work with customers around what's changed because of COVID. And what we found is that the journeys generally stayed very similar. What changed was channels. I previously would have gone into your showroom, but actually now I'm going to do that online. Or I would have researched that by walking into a retail shop. Now I'm going to go and look at reviews on websites and stuff. So the steps of the journey were still very similar, but the activities changed in some way, shape, or form. So revisiting your journey is important, but using your own live data should allow you to make it a bit of a living object.
Yeah, that's an interesting point too, where you mentioned COVID, and obviously that has changed our channels. And one of our listeners, or one of our viewers here, has commented, you know, when you can't get everyone live in the room together, working from home, you know, introduces those new complexities. And so this listener's, you know, put forward a couple of helpful tools like Miro to help with that process, and you offered a few others too. Are there any others that we should be thinking about? Because we're also remote now, we all work all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, all of those collaboration tools, Miro, Mural, Lucidcharts, there are loads of them. A lot of them will have customer journey templates as part of their frameworks. The ability for people to put a virtual post note up. We spent 2 years doing that and getting quite good at a couple of them. But we still prefer to go face-to-face if we can. But yeah, any of those collaboration tools will also work as part of that.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
two
there's
I did
nothing
last
like
week
sticky notes, is there? Those sticky little post-it notes. They're great for customer journey mapping.
Yeah, I did a customer journey mapping workshop last week, and we had half of the people on site, and we had 4 people over a Teams meeting. And we actually mapped it using post-it notes, but their contribution, somebody else was then writing down and sticking on notes and stuff. So you can do it in terms of that. They were interstate, so we were able to get all the right people.
Fantastic. So here's an interesting one too, and it made me think about, you know, you talked about the acquisition journey, you talked about the relationship journey. Do you approach this all in the one hit, or should successful journeys be rolled out in a phase? So how do you kind of interconnect those different types of journey and make sure that that life cycle flow continues coherently?
Yeah, it's a question that often comes up. There are so many journeys in our business. Where do we even start? What's the stuff that, and that's part of the reason why we start with what's the biggest business challenge? Is it acquiring customers? Is it keeping customers? Is it upsell, cross-sell? Is it conversion? Because whatever the biggest business challenge is, whatever you think is going to have the biggest impact on the bottom line, that's where you should start your journey mapping. And very often we'll clients and they'll say, oh, we've got so many journeys. And then we'll say, well, let's write them all down. And so we'll get them to write down every possible journey that they can think of, and then we'll put them up on a whiteboard and group them out. And it turns out actually, yes, they do. They've got loads of journeys, but those 5 are all quite similar, and those 5 are the same thing. And actually, there's only 6 journeys that really matter. And if we can fix those 2, boy, the whole world's going to change and the needle moves. So if you start from what's the business objective that's going to have the biggest impact, and then look at the journeys related to that, your priorities become quite clear quite quickly, rather than going, oh, well, there's all these journeys, which one should I map?
Yeah, and you know, it really saves you going down rabbit holes, doesn't you? Which is so easy to do. So yeah. There's quite a few comments that came in around the research process, a reasonable research budget, but also just accounting for survey bias too. So people who agree to do a survey often themselves are not always a true representative of the population, just because they're the ones that put themselves forward. So, you know, how do you account for that?
Yeah. So we actually have a research professional as part of our organization, and she throws things at me when I start talking about research, because my view is that any research is better than none, provided you do acknowledge that bias. I mean, we have clients who've spent big budgets on research. So we did a big corporate project where we did research with their own customers. We then went and recruited competitor customers. We ran the same survey with them. We did a whole bunch of work on their database. We spoke to their intermediaries. We spoke to a whole bunch of end customers, and we did a whole bunch of work on that particular space. And the more you can invest in research, the better. But mapping out the journey itself is better than nothing. And any research, if you, as I say, if you acknowledge the bias of what you're getting from that research input, the worst thing you can do is do one piece of research and then map everything on that one thing. Very often with customer journeys, the journey is an aggregation of everything we've learned, right? We spoke to somebody here, and then we saw a survey there, and there was an industry paper that we read over here, and there was a bunch of data we got from the website there, and there's a whole bunch of audience segmentation things that we did over there. And all of that data should collaborate. It should all say, yep, this is sort of what happens. They say that this is important to them. And if we look on the website, yep, that content's getting lots of engagement. And there seems to be loads of that stuff happening in terms of people commenting like that when we're on review sites. And so the process of going through it is really important. And hopefully that then offsets any bias you have in any one piece of the puzzle in terms of that research. As I say, with startups, we often don't do much research at all. We might speak to 3 or 4 of their customers, put a plan together, and then it's all test and learn. Whereas if you've got the budget, it's all about certainty about how accurate we think the journey is.
Yeah, I imagine it'd be quite challenging with startups, but great way to test a journey, hey? You talked about pain points, and I always find this quite interesting with customer journey mapping, because there's always those little pain points and you're like, what are we going to do about these? But often they turn into really good opportunities too. Do you have just some examples of where that's occurred, or of what you've observed in your vast experience in customer journey mapping?
Pain points are brilliant. Pain points are really what you're looking for, because around every pain point or every consumer frustration is opportunity. There is opportunity for revenue, there is opportunity for differentiation. The pain point is really, the more you can understand that pain point, the more you can say, is this an industry pain point? Is this everybody's pain? Or is there something specific to us in our process? And what are the opportunities for us to leverage that? So for example, if you think about Uber took the customer journey of somebody coming and picking you up in a car, taking you to somewhere else, dropping you off and taking money from you. And they looked at every single pain point in that journey. They knocked out those pain points. They built an app that allowed you to find the cab. They made you rate each other, so you were polite to each other. They made it easy to pay for it. And just by taking out those pain points, they came up with a model that allowed them to take over the industry in about 7 different countries around the globe. So pain points are really what you want to find in a customer journey, because if you can find them, you can then say, what are we going to do about this? How are we going to get into it?
I think we just lost a bit of volume then, Mike, just right when you were talking about the key clincher.
Nope.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes, no, that's good. That's good.
Am I back again? Okay, cool.
Yes, you are. Yes.
So the more you get into and understand your pain points, the more it becomes an opportunity. And some of that is how do we address those pain points? If we fix it, what's the value to the customer? What's the value to us? And how hard would it be to fix it? And if you look at each pain point through that lens, you can then get a fairly clear priority of what stuff do we go after next in terms of what it is. I saw there was a question saying, do we identify it as we go? They naturally come up as you go. The more you sort of, as you map out that space, you then think about where are the key spaces we want to go after. Because if we can fix that pain point, that will then be the thing that potentially unlocks a whole bunch of value in the journey.
Exactly. And that's the great thing about doing these journeys. And unfortunately, speaking of journeys, I think that's about all the time we have for our journey this afternoon. So I'm going to say a really big thanks to you, Mike. That was fantastic. And also a big thanks to everyone who attended this afternoon. As mentioned, we're going to
any more questions, feel free to connect to me on LinkedIn or send me an email or whatever. Very happy to.
That's great. Thanks, Mike. I'm sure you've sparked a whole heap of questions, so that'll be fantastic. So we're going to be sending a survey to everyone afterwards, and we're also going to be sending a customer journey mapping toolkit. And there's a few extra resources and tools too. All as a big thank you to everyone for attending. There's been a number of people asking if this recording is going to be available afterwards. We will be sending a link to the recording in the next couple of days. So please share that with your colleagues and have a listen to it. And also please complete your surveys. We really want to hear your feedback and take that on board for our upcoming webinars, which will be rolling out next year. You can also stay connected with ADMA via Facebook and LinkedIn, where you'll be the first to know about our next webinars and events. And on our website, you'll find the ADMA IQ course calendar. So we hope to see you all again very soon, and thank you again for attending.